This creepypasta is called 29th Dragon. Atop the salt-encrusted docks and piers of Seattle squats an ugly clapboard shack, its windows mirrored with grime and the walls draped in fishing nets. The oil slick, an amply named bar riddled with age and barnacles, but a sanctuary to the swarm of deckhands and sailors that spent their days scurrying across the rotting hulls of ships, and their nights slipping into a drunken stupor. It's a rough bar where a careless comment will earn you a punch to the face and a long fall into the grimy waters below. On any given night, one can find an aged Chinese sailor curled up against the bar, a broad-shouldered old salt with a bulging gut and empty stare pasted across his wide face. His name is Hao Ming, but to the regular flotsam of the pub, he's known as the Man of the 28 Dragons. 28 scaly, tattooed reptiles twine seamlessly across his arms and legs and twist menacingly across the bunch muscles on his back. Hao claims each dragon represents a crucial part of his life. Stories transformed into ink. Buy him a drink and he'll be happy to share the thrilling tales behind each one, carefully describing how the dragon's colors represent his joy, terror, love, loss, and death. Visit him 28 nights and buy him 28 drinks, and the powerful stories of his life will weave and merge before your eyes until they resolve into the aging man drinking next to you. And then, satisfied, you have exhausted his treasury of adventures. You'll excuse yourself and float out into the night. The light and noise of the oil slick bobbing away across the dark waves, and the Man of the 28 Dragons will finish his drink and clutch his faded shirt to his chest. His last secret, his hidden dragon safe. He swore long ago to never reveal the tattoo or the story to any living soul, and he never has, except once. Once on a stormy night, when the rain spattered like ink across the grimy windows, and the wind howled through cracked wood, when he told a story to me. It began as an entertaining night as I leaned on the counter, sipping my poison and watching Ming pummel the face of some quartermaster who had drunkenly slurred a remark pertaining to damn slant eyes from across the bar. Stumbling backwards, the sailor grabbed at Ming's shirt, tearing the front and momentarily revealing Ming's chest. With a roar, Ming caught him under the chin and the drunkard slumped to the floor. Game over. Ming pulled the shirt back across his shoulders and walked back to his drink. The noise in the bar returned to normal, everyone laughing and continuing their private banter. I was the only one who noticed it. The black serpent scrawled over his heart, a Chinese dragon, its broad tail curling in loops behind it, long whiskers sprouting from his face like tangles of wet hair. Arming myself with the twin barrels of gil and alcohol, I took the seat next to him and offered him several slugs of amber liquid. He recognized me as one of the regulars and knowingly accepted my offer. Okay, friend, he winked, holding out his arms. What story do you want to hear tonight? I pointed my finger at his chest, indicating the hidden serpent curled around his heart. His smile vanished in a flash. With an inscrutable gaze, he stared into my eyes. His heavy lips curled down to a frown, almost a grimace. No good story, he grunted. Forget you've seen it, okay? I was tempted to give up, but noticed he was rocking slightly in his chair. Seizing my chance, I clapped him on the shoulder, telling him not to worry about it and ordering him several more drinks in the spirit of goodwill. 2 hours and a dozen drinks later, he broke. He began to sob quietly into his cup, telling me he was sorry, that he wanted to tell me but swore he wouldn't. With the precision of a surgeon, I knifed across his slurred words and stabbed into his psyche, prodding and poking until he dissolved completely. Closing his eyes, he began the story of the Black Dragon. I'll share it with you here. The oil clipper threaded its way across the currents of South China Sea, with a hole filled with rice. She was bound on a 3-week trip to Sydney. Ming, the lines of age not yet etched so deeply into his face, was a simple deckhand on the rusted, peeling bucket. The days rolled into nights as Ming performed his duties, his mind locked on their destination. The poor condition of the ship meant it needed a long overhaul in dry dock when it reached port, granting the crew a long shore leave. The men joked every night around the dim steel cabin about the things they would drink, the places they will go, and women that they will meet. But on the 10th day of the voyage, fate rose a middle finger against the ship and Ming's life. As the morning wore on, a steady breeze from the north quickly built into a typhoon. Waves pounded against and over the ship as a stinging wind tore across the bow. For the next 30 hours, Ming and the crew struggled against the howling chaos, shifting ballast and pumping the holds. Each man put every ounce of strength into saving the clipper, and ultimately his own life. 2 of the crew were torn from the deck and swallowed by the storm. At long last, There was nothing left to do but sit in a dark cabin and beg Poseidon for mercy. The crew awoke to a cloudless sunrise, the sea once again tranquil and flat. Walking outside, they surveyed the damage. The rudder had been torn free and the engine blocks destroyed. The ship was adrift. The cargo hold had been flooded and the cargo was lost. Even worse, the crashing waves had reached over the boat and sheared off the communication tower. Without radio navigation, low on food and fresh water, the crippled ship drifted helplessly across the blue expanse. Ming lay prostrate on the metal deck, feeling the sun beat savagely against his body. 3 nights ago, the food supplies had run out and the water was put on ration. A deckhand had died of an infected wound. Another injured man had escaped slow, lingering death by hanging himself. Morale was nigh. Even the captain had begun to eye the end of his own pistol. The next night, a light appeared on the horizon. "Rescue!" cried one of the men to another. They quickly built and lit a signal fire on the deck and waved flashlights into the dark, yelling and screaming out to the saviors. Their efforts were successful. The bright light was moving closer. At this point in the story, Ming dropped his voice into a low whisper. The crew's elation only rose as the ship drew near. Soon, a second light could be discerned under the first. The glow from the ship lit up the dark outlines of the men on the deck. They laughed and shouted, "Hello," across the water, but not Ming. Backing away from the light, Ming stumbled down the deck until he reached the cabin. Peering out of the metal porthole, he watched the men slowly realize what he had noticed first. There weren't 2 lights. There was one light, reflecting off the undisturbed surface of the water. Above, floating high over the waves, the ship glided into view. A dull, silver dome, hundreds of meters across, eclipsed the stars as it bore down upon the boat, its undersides blazing with inferno of the sun. A fire of light climbed up the sides of the hull and spilled across the deck, enveloping the crew. Heart hammering, Ming collapsed below the porthole. Outside, he hears the surprised cries of the men rising above the crackling of luminous air. A pistol shot rang out, and another. Ming flees across the cabin, spotting a metal locker. He ducks inside, pulling the door shut. More shots. Then the cries of men morph into screams and shrieks. Crouched over, Ming peers through a gap along the floor of the locker. Suddenly, the screams stop mid-breath. A spear of light smashes into the boat, the steel hull groaning and twisting. The inferno spreads across the length of the boat, penetrating into the cabin. The light pounces from the gap into Ming's eyes. With a yelp, he falls back. The blaze vanishes. Silence shrouds the ship. Ears ringing and eyes burning, Ming's head reels. He crouches down to peer through the crack again. Nothing. Minutes pass. With short breaths, he slowly reaches up to the latch, but as vision swims back into his clouded eyes and the ringing in his head subsides, he freezes. A soft noise brushes against the cloud of silence. Pit, pat. Half deafened by the hammering of his heart, Ming listens to the stillness outside. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. He leans back down to the slit and peers across the cabin, blinking the darkness out of his eyes. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. The gentle disturbance growing louder. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Pit, pat. Struggling to see what lies beyond the upper edge of his vision, he lays his head flat against the metal floor. A long, black tendril drips down from the darkness above. Pat. Ming nearly cries out, but stalls before it escapes his lips. Pit. Wide-eyed, he gazes as the thin legs of some unknown creature gently slaps against the floor. Pat. Cylindrical, an inch wide, the legs end in a knobby stub that flattens as it hits the metal. Pit. The legs stalk back and forth in front of the locker with a gentle rustling of undisturbed leaves. Pat. Pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat, pit, pat. The feet patter as the creature slowly walks the length of the cabin. Pit, pat, pit, pat, pit. The tendrils pause in front of the locker. Frozen in fear, Ming watches as they delicately lumber closer. Silence. With a softer sound than before, like the brushing aside of a curtain, unseen arms explore the doors of the locker, prodding, searching. A sharp screech of metal, and the latch begins to rattle. As the bolts slide open, Ming clamps his eyes shut. A sudden brilliance of light flows in from the gap. A sudden pitter, and the latch falls down. Soft footsteps retreating from the cabin. The light disappears. Once again, Ming is left in the blackness. The next morning, he slowly exits the walker and wanders onto the deck. The boat is devoid of life. The deck and cabin are seared glossy black. A wide hole melted through the steel yawns down into the hole below. Quickly, Ming grabs the remaining fresh water and stores it onto the ship's lifeboat, along with a scorched pistol he finds near the railing. With starvation and certainty, he casts away from the clipper, rowing endlessly until his dark shape disappears over the horizon. The next day, he's discovered and rescued by an Australian freighter. He rages deliriously of floating lights, thin tendrils of legs that slap, a soft rustling in the night. A week later, he explains to an official inquiry that the ship's fuel tank exploded and sunk with all the hands but himself. The clipper is never found, and the public's interest fades. Ming moves on with his life. As he finishes his story, he opens his eyes. I'm astonished, not to mention doubtful, at his vivid account. Still, I can't figure out why he kept such an incredible tale silent for so long. I ask. He turns towards me, tears rolling down from the wrinkled corners of his eyes. I shouldn't have told you story, he mumbles. I know tell story, and people stay happy. Annoyed, I grab my hat and rise to leave. Suddenly, he grabs my coat with both hands and pulls me towards his face. The sounds, he cries. I hear them before. I hear them after. My whole life I hear them, but not see them. Now I know. I know what stalks in the night outside my window. He waves a finger in front of my face. You hear them too, but you not know what they are. I know. They following you too. Pit-pat, 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 pit-pat. Behind you in the shadow. Anguished, he screams, spit and tears flying off his face. Always, always, they are watching you from the darkness. Okay, so hopefully y'all enjoy that creepypasta called 29th Dragon. It's a creepypasta I've done a while ago, and I decided, hey, instead of just like going my backlog like I've been doing recently with like all my older videos, you guys definitely tell the difference between my old mic and this one, and just like the overall quality of the story. So I don't really have anything else to say. If you guys enjoy the story, please leave a like in this video. It does help the channel. And if you want to see more, feel free to subscribe. Alright, outside of that, I have nothing else to say. Just thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye everyone.